Today's guest is Torkil Færø. Torkil is a Norwegian physician and author of the bestseller The Pulse Cure, which focuses on heart rate variability and the correlation to health. Torkil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony. It's great to be here.
It's wonderful to have you on. I'm excited and intrigued to talk about some heart rate variability. Are you coming to us from Norway this morning?
That's right. That's right. So here is almost evening time
It's
in
almost
Oslo.
evening.
Yeah.
It's about 8 in the morning out in Chicago here.
All right. Yeah. And it's cool that we can talk and there's no delay in as we were talking and discussing, just a fantastic tool to be able to do this.
Yeah, it's been great, and I'm sure with promoting the book and reaching different audiences and this is what I love to do the podcast because it's like a grassroots version of getting some information out that some people might not even have access to.
That's right.
And then for the listeners, can you give us some background on how you found yourself in medicine and what was your motivation to write the Pulse Cure?
How I found myself in medicine, that was actually to be able to travel the world and see the world to because in Norway you can work part-time, you can take 2 weeks here and 2 weeks there and work and then go off traveling. So my initial motivation behind becoming a doctor was actually to see the world and to have a free life. But 10 years ago, my father died, and he died from a lifestyle-related disease that most diseases are these days. And I could see that if I continued my lifestyle, because I've done all the mistakes in my own book, I would not probably not live to see 80 years old. And I would want to live as long as possible. So then I understood I have to change my lifestyle around totally. And as I did that, I found out that using heart rate variability, using the rhythm of the heart, it can guide you towards the right choices. Because when you do the right choices, it will improve your heart rate variability. And if you do the wrong choices that I was a master at, you will also see that in your heart rate variability. And it's a magnificent tool, that probably you and most of your listeners will already have on their wrist, and they may not be aware of the possibility that exists in using the heart rate to monitor your lifestyle.
Yeah, and then for those that are unfamiliar with the book, The Pulse Cure, can you explain what HRV is and
Mhm.
why that's a good metric for health?
Yeah. So my book, The Pulse Cure, which has been a bestseller in Norway now for close to 2 years, is a book on on the best strategies for lifestyle, and combined with using the wearables to guide it. And heart rate variability will see how your autonomic nervous system works, how your stress balance, if it's good enough, if it's sustainable and compatible with health over time. So we need to stress and we need to put loads on our body, to become stronger and more fit. But we also need to recover properly. And many athletes and many people in general, they are under-recovered. There's not enough focus on the downstate, on relaxing, on sleeping, on recovering after exercise or after life stress in total. And the way the heartbeat can show that and reveal the state of our stress balance is that if we are in the relaxed mode, then the heart rate will have a variation between the heartbeats. When we breathe in and there's more oxygen in the lungs, the heart rate will go up a little bit. And when we breathe out and there's less oxygen in the lungs, the heart will allow itself, so to speak, to relax a little bit, measured in milliseconds. Hardly detectable, but if you're in a really calm mode, you can feel it yourself with your pulse and your carotid artery. But if you're in the stress state, then your heart will beat like a metronome, regardless of your breathing in or out. It will just beat at a very steady pace. And this is how the wearables can detect your stress balance and measure it in the moment and throughout the day and night while you're busy living your life. And it can tell you so much about the load on your system, your ability to have a flexible nervous system, to be able to calm down, and also to stress when you need to.
Okay, and we hear it all the times of like we were talking about my Garmin earlier. There's different wearables that you're hearing, the Whoop, Aura, things like that. Which brand or style do you recommend for people? Is it specific
Mm.
like athletes should kind of get this, or this is good for just average people?
I think for most people, Garmin watches are the best, like the one you have. Your version is a bit old, so there's a lot
Hmm.
of new things about it that is has improved a lot. Your watch is probably 4 or 5 years old, I would guess. And so Garmin for most people is by far the best choice and also the cheaper option often. But you can also use the Whoop band, as you mentioned, and the Oura ring and the Apple Watch, and almost all of the modern smartwatches will have some kind of system that will tell you about your stress balance. But Garmin is by far the best one, um, as it will show you the stress level in the moment and throughout the day in very useful graphs. But it also depends, Garmin is the best to kind of micromanage your stress levels. If you just want to have like glimpses into the state of your physiology, then it might be a Whoop band or a ring will be good enough.
Hmm. And do you recommend for athletes that they have, if they're doing training, let's say like endurance endeavors, the chest strap? Because I know a lot of people recommend having the chest strap versus, yes, this does also do that, on the wrist, but is there a difference if you're working out of your heart rate variability?
Yeah, the chest strap, if you do some vigorous activity, like running or tennis or racket sports or whatever, then it's best to have the chest strap. Absolutely. But often I forget it, and then I can see that at least my new Garmin watch will do pretty much the same job. But you're more certain to have the right result with a chest strap.
And with HRV, what number is a good number for somebody? And does that differ between male and female?
There will be minor differences between male and female. It will not be such, maybe 1 or 2, 3 milliseconds in a difference on the averages. And there's kind of a 50% genetic component to it. So you shouldn't really compare your HRV to anyone else's because it will not necessarily, like if you have a low one that you could consider having like 25 milliseconds, which would be normally considered a low one for your age, um, then another person that may have 50 or 60 could have exactly the same objective health level because of this genetic component. So the most important thing is to find out how good can you get your heart rate variability under the like perfect circumstances and just compare yourself to yourself, really.
Okay.
And I would say we talked about the chest strap, and the most important thing for athletes, they often focus too much on their heart rate during training. But I would say that the most important thing is how your heart rate reacts after the session. That
Mhm.
will tell you more about how well you tolerated that session than the heart rate in itself, or even your resting heart rate. You could have the same resting heart rate at night, say that you have, for example, 45 in a resting heart rate, but your heart rate variability as a measure of whether you are overtrained or not can be kind of double or half the value. So I often say it's like watching your heart rate with a magnifying glass. So the heart rate variability will tell you so much more for an athlete.
Yeah, and you talked about this before of almost like gamifying or gamification of your life and in your training.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So
Mhm.
it becomes kind of a game where you suddenly have a dashboard to your own physiology, just like you have in your car, and you have all these different things, that technology can get out of your movement, from your pulse, from your sleep, from your temperature, and all of this, and use artificial intelligence and can tell you so much more, and it will just probably just escalate in the coming years as well.
And when we go into the doctor's office, the traditional methods of assessing, you're looking at a blood pressure or just your just beats per minute, on the monitor. Is HRV superior, not? Are they all kind of the same, giving you kind of the same exact
Mm.
idea?
I would say that no, HRV is superior.
Mm.
Or of course, if you have a bad blood pressure, if your blood pressure is too high, it may absolutely be more dangerous. But it would also, I don't think that you would have a high blood pressure without also having a low HRV. So those would be connected in somewhat. But the good thing about heart rate variability is that you have this number on your wrist available at all times, and you have it, not the doctor. You don't have to wait and pay the doctor to see the results. You have them on your wrist at all times. So you have the control. And your heart rate variability will tell you a lot about your risk of contracting any kind of disease, any kind of lifestyle disease. That includes heart disease and cancer and autoimmune diseases and so many other diseases that we struggle with. So if you have a good heart rate variability, that is a sign that your immune system is working smoothly and that you have a good physiology. Then your risk of getting a disease is a lot less. As you probably know that just if you're exercising a certain amount a week, you reduce your chances of getting cancer and heart disease, by a lot.
Yeah, that number that's attached to me, it's also empowering, right? If this is the number that I'm looking for, um, you know, I'm gonna be doing my day to day looking at that number, and also like we talk about preventive care a lot and lifestyle choices. Like you were mentioning, there's a lot of diseases that are caused by just lifestyle in general. Um, but going into that, let's just talk about physical activity at first. What types of physical activity or training should we be doing to improve our HRV?
Well, the optimal for longevity, that seems to be record sports. I don't know the reason for that. It probably that it involves a lot of, speed, changing directions, cooperating with another person, obviously. And that is both kind of explosive and then it's also endurance and so on, technique, coordination. So racket sports seems to be the best one for health and longevity. But for HRV, I would say that would be probably any endurance sport, like running, like cardio, like high intensity training and so on. And anything is a lot better than nothing. And you don't, the worst thing is to be in that lowest 25% of VO2 max, because we can also probably compare it to the VO2 max. It's probably a better number to to watch than the heart rate variability number in itself. So to have among the lowest VO2 max levels that you can also get from your Garmin, and an Apple Watch and so on, to be in the lowest quarter, the lowest 25%, those are the ones who get sick. Once you get to the 50% and more, then it doesn't really matter so much whether you're on the 50% or among the 5% best VO2 max. The difference in health level and longevity is not so big. So you don't really have to struggle very hard and use 10 hours a week to improve your VO2 max to live longer. You may of course do it to run faster and win the game, but for longevity, being there in the middle is good enough, I would say.
I've also heard about racket sports and squash and tennis and how those are correlated with some of the one of the best options for being healthy for lifespan. But I think it is because, you do a little bit of sprinting and you recover a little bit, and then you sprint a little bit, then you recover, and you're also out there. It's something you're going to do a lot. You're going to do it because you're having fun as well. We always like think of fitness and training as like it's got to be this intense, like really hard workout or exercising, but it could just be fun.
Yeah. Actually, tennis would obviously be more fun, also. And you have this, as you say, you sprint and then you pause, and then there's a lot of pauses. And actually, the best tennis players are the ones who can lower their heart rate between the balls, so that
Mhm.
they are experts at calming themselves down, before the next strike or whatever you call it in tennis.
Yeah, and then how much, because I know when people see these numbers and people get into data and the metrics of things, and they start to add more to their lifestyle and their day to day, how much working out is too much? Because I feel like there is an opposite end to this where people are actually overdoing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they may not necessarily overdo it, but they would under recover. So
Hmm.
I think that is more precise, to say that. But normally, exercising more than 7 to 10 hours a week is often connected to worse outcomes than not training at all. You may be training too much. You may be too hard a load on your heart and on your system. We don't have a physiology that is constructed for those kind of loads, really. If we put these wearables on hunter-gatherer societies that still exist today, we see that they are in moderate activity 2 or 3 hours a day. They're walking maybe 15,000 to 20,000 steps. And occasionally in between them, they are really pushing their forces. But most of the time it's in moderate. So actually there would be, I think I'm rarely impressed by the longevity of former athletes. It's not like when you see their obituaries that you think, well, wow, he or she lived a long life. It's more often the opposite, that you're kind of surprised that they didn't reach 70 or 75 or whatever. And from my clinical experience, the ones that live the longest, they have not been exercising. They have just been moving naturally. They have been outside, maybe gardening, walking, maybe living in such a place that they would need to move naturally. They've been eating real food, and having good relationships and these things that are more often connected to longevity and the good health. So it's not necessarily so that the more you push yourself and the more you exercise, the better health will be the outcome.
And I like how you hit the other points of like relationships. Like this is it's not just about the working out. We're gonna get into some nutrition as well, but that holistic approach to health and well-being versus I'm just gonna be going to the gym and that's gonna take care of all of my problems. And with that recovery, we talked about it a little bit earlier. When my watch tells me, and that's why I don't really know what to believe of the watch. I know it's probably telling me the right
Hmm.
things, but I'll do a workout, like a run, 4 miles, five, whatever it might be. And then the recovery will show up at when I click the end button and it'll say recovery 48 hours. And I was like, 48
Hmm.
hours? I felt good on that run. Is that something
Yeah.
that just in the moment that the watch is calculating and making an assumption, or is it
It's
like from the
it's
whole
it's made
day? Yeah.
yeah, it may be related. So if you had a tough workout the day before, that maybe gave you 36 hours, and you have the next session before those 36 hours, it will add, maybe 10 hours from the previous workout. So that may be one of the reasons why we were surprised, because it still kept kind of 10 hours from the day before, and
Mhm.
added on to this one session. But often it will be very hard to find out when you go over the lactic acid threshold. You will not necessarily feel it, but and that is why athletes, need to take the finger test, to check for lactic acid, because it's hard to know. And once you go into that lactic acid threshold, you need a lot more recovery. So that may also be one of the explanations why you are surprised, because you were pushing it into zone 3 or into zone 4, without really feeling it because you felt so good. But pushing yourself so hard that you will have a lot of lactic acid will need a lot of recovery time after that. For example, when I did the VO2 max test, you're just running as hard as you can, maybe 6 or 8 minutes, on the treadmill. From when you start until you're finished, it's 6 to 8 minutes. And I got 96 hours of recovery time. And I really felt that as well. I felt like I had a flu for several days. And if I would run in zone 2, for example, for 1.5 hours, I would probably get less than 20 hours of recovery time. So it's that last high intensity part of it that will give you this really extra time, and it is not necessarily worth it, you know. And that is why the best athletes often have 80% of their exercise in zone 2, and then maybe 20% in the more high intensity zone.
Yeah, one of the things that I've covered on the podcast is I've had some instructors, master instructors come on, and one of the things is anti-glycolytic training, where you'll start to develop that lactic acid, but giving it the time that your body needs to clear it before your next activity or your next session, which is a
Hmm.
different way of training in the States that people are used to. People are used to high intensity interval training, going to these group classes, get like smashing it, and they feel that they've done a good job if they're on the floor, like panting,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's
it's
right.
and
Yeah, and it's
that's the
not
assumption, yeah.
necessarily, yeah, not necessarily the best way, and particularly if they have a hard, stressful life. If they have a stressful job, they have a family life that demands a lot of them, and then they think that, okay, I only have 2 hours a week to exercise, so I need to go all in and maximize, the effort, and that is not necessarily compatible with a good health overall. And most people, I think there's a tendency among ambitious people to overdo it. I think so. And the watches will then tell you, the new Garmin watches, they have a training readiness. So they will give you an estimate of how well prepared you are for this day to push yourself. And I can easily find that is a good measurement, because when I have a low training readiness and I can do just for experimenting, I do this exactly the same run, more or less the same speed and heart rate. And I can see that after the session, the heart rate, if I have a low training readiness for some whatever reason, then my heart rate will be higher the rest of the day than if I had a good training readiness and that I was well rested and recovered before I did the exercise. So I would look even more to the how the heart rate reacts after the session than during the session.
Mm. Have you ever heard of the Mathadone method at all?
No, not really.
Phil Mathadone, he kind of coined this little formula. I started to use it a little bit after, like I've done endurance events, Ironman, and I used it a little bit for my Ironman, and that's helped me. But before I was doing some marathon training, I did not use the method. But it's basically, you know, not going over your maximum aerobic function threshold of, so they're basically putting at like take 180, minus your age. Like say if you're 30, that's 150 beats per minute, and you can't go over that. And you stay at that, if you're doing long runs. I easily can pick up the pace and feel good and go, but I'll go above the 150. And so you force people to stay lower. And so in time, that they stay at that heart rate, which they feel like they're not going very fast. But over time, you will actually develop more speed and more endurance, but your heart rate will stay the same. That's kind of like the general
Yeah, yeah,
idea of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That is what I've done. I'm going to run the New York Marathon now in November, and I've been doing exactly that. Just slowly exercising more, and I can run faster and longer at the same heart rate. So that's been my experiment for the exercise. I would be curious to know your VO2 max. So it would be. I have a VO2 max of 46, so which is like excellent for my age, the Garmin watch says.
Yeah, I know
So
we're we're
and that is important when because so many people, if they have low VO2 max and they decide to, okay, I'm gonna start exercising now, I'm gonna start a new life.
mhm.
But if you then have a VO2 max down to maybe 30, 32, you cannot tolerate much before you go into above the threshold and you're full of lactic acid and you feel sick and demotivated and want to quit, you know. So I think a lot of personal trainers underestimate the intensity that people with a low VO2 max can tolerate without getting into the lactic acid. And the Garmin watches will tell you after a session how much anaerobic and how much aerobic load you put on yourself. And the aim then often would be to have a good load on the aerobic side and as little as possible on the anaerobic side, which would release the lactic acid. So
Yeah, because anaerobic, you're that's your full clip, like you're full sprinting at that point. Uh,
yeah.
uh, and with we want to take care of physical activity, make sure we're recovered, making sure we're smart about that and not overtraining. But what role does diet play in optimizing HRV?
Yeah, the diet is also very important. And a lot of people will find out from their watches and devices that if they eat junk food or they eat, crisps or chips or, Dunkin' Donuts and all kinds of poor nutritional value food, that it will also stress your system. A lot of people will find out that eating bakery goods like bread and you know, buns and all of these kind of things will also create stress on your system, that it will raise your heart rate and you will use some of your energy handling this kind of food that your body and your intestines don't really tolerate well, that will create an inflammation in your body. And instead of the immune system kind of repairing your muscles and building yourself stronger, it has to deal with this inflammation that is created in your system. So I think for an athlete, it's very important to pay attention to your diet and to, eat real food, food that your great grandmother would recognize as food, foods that don't need any label to tell you what it is or any, advice on this contains vitamin D or, the real good food with nutritional value that doesn't have any label on it. So that would be important. And it would also be important to have a restricted feeding window so that you don't eat too late in the day. Maybe that you stop eating maybe 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed so that your intestinal system gets enough time to recover because it's a very vulnerable system. It's like one cell from the contents of your intestines into the bloodstream. So if you eat poor food that creates inflammation, it's like having an open wound, in your stomach, in your gut, um, that will sap you of your forces that you would rather want to have to recover better and build yourself stronger. So
Lots of the conversations that we have on this podcast, this mainly most people are come to this one for like a primal diet, which is consisting of like animal meats, right? Animal
yeah,
fats.
yeah,
But we also talk about like I've had just recently Dr. Bill Schindler, he was an
yeah, I know
archaeologist
him.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I met him. I met him in Oslo. Yeah, he's a
oh,
great guy.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
wonderful. And things that we talk about on here is really get connected to your food, which is important, and really understanding where it's coming from. But this extra piece of trying to really avoid ultra processed, highly palatable foods because they are addicting, over consuming, and they wreak havoc, like you were saying, the inflammation piece. Most of these illnesses that we're dealing with is just chronic inflammation over and over again.
yeah.
But getting down to those single ingredients and those whole foods is going to be, I think, it's really hard for people to wrap themselves around because our landscape of food has changed dramatically. We don't know where our food
The
comes from. We get it from packages,
yeah.
and we think this is where food comes from.
Yeah, yeah, and to find that real food, is quite a challenge in the stores.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Eat Like a Human, the Bill Schindler book. So it's
Yeah.
a great advice. Yeah, and the good thing about the wearables, and then particularly Garmin, because to micromanage this, you would need a Garmin. that you can see that certain kind of foods will stress your system. And that could be a surprise. It could also be for me like chili is like that will be just like alcohol. So if there's some chili in the food, I may not even, taste it as spicy. It's just in the food, and then my stress levels will be super high throughout the night. And I will
And
wake up the next morning with a hangover just from the chili. So
from
so
Chile.
from chili, yeah. So a lot of people get there, and I've heard lots of other people as well. And of course, even before I had a wearable, I would eat chili, and I would, of course, never think, when I wake up, 8, 9 o'clock, that how I feel would have any connection to what I ate, 12 hours before. So,
You,
but just when you see the results, you immediately understand that, wow, oh, my heart rate went up from 60 to 75. What's happening here, and then you can understand then, of course, that okay, it's the chili. Once it happens, several times, you understand the common denominator of what happened. So
you mentioned alcohol has
yeah.
has alcohol affected does it affect HRV in like a small quantity? Are we talking like one glass? Because a lot of people will use that as kind of the de-stressor of the night. Like
Yeah.
I'll have a glass of wine or two at night, or is it over consuming alcohol that really messes with the HRV?
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Both.
So, and I used to think that as well, because in the alcohol, you will feel calm. Of course, that is why so many people use it. But the problem comes when the alcohol is converted into acetaldehyde in your body, and acetaldehyde is very toxic. So it has to be prioritized over anything else, including then, of course, recovery, and muscle building and whatever. So I can see that when you have the wearable, that my stress level for maybe 6, 7 hours throughout the night is as high as if I'm standing having a lecture in front of 200 people. So the body, when you feel terrible, after a party, it's not just the feeling, it's your body has been super stressed throughout the night. And according to Whoop, that tracks their users, it takes 5 days after you've been out drinking until you're back again at full recovery. So then if you drink 2 times a week, you will never be knowing your optimal performance. So
Wow.
so for an athlete to spend energy on alcohol would be a very, very poor choice. Yeah. So the best athletes, they don't drink any alcohol.
Yeah, I went through a phase where, I actually cut out alcohol completely, and I wasn't. I've cut back over the years and try to kind of minimize it. But the one thing I did, I originally wanted to do 30 days, no alcohol, no wine, no beer, no nothing. I felt so good that I kicked it to 60 days. So I did 60 days of no alcohol, and the one thing, and something I want to talk about as well, is my sleep. I'm a terrible sleeper. I just really hard for me to get down. I've tried a bunch of different things to do, but the one thing is when I absolutely took alcohol out, I like was like a sack of potatoes on the bed, and I would just
Yeah,
fall
yeah.
asleep in my recovery. Is there anything we all know that sleep is important, but is there anything that you do in particular or know of people to optimize their sleep?
Yeah, to optimize the sleep is the most important thing. It's also the first chapter in my book, The Pulse Cure, because it's kind of the foundation of everything else. Once you sleep well, you get enough, you feel better, and it's easier to make the good choices and to go out running. If you don't feel refreshed and had a poor night of sleep, you don't want to do the exercise, you don't want to eat the right things, you take the not so smart choice. So, and to sleep, the optimal way to sleep is to go to bed and wake up at the same time, more or less every day, within maybe a half an hour window, that you have a good sleep consistency. That's one of the most important things. And also then that you can track on your wearable that your sleep is actually restorative. And for it to be restorative, you need to not have eaten late. You need to not have trained, exercise hard late in the evening. You should not exercise hard maybe 3 or 4 hours before you go to bed, because then it will disturb the sleep. You should not have had caffeine after maybe noon at the same day. That will be very individual. Some will tolerate it better than others, but most people will react to it by not getting optimal sleep. And then also you need to wind down the last 1 or 2 hours before you go to sleep. Um, dim the lights, have a cool bedroom, not cold, but quite cool. That will improve the restorative effect of it. Uh, yeah, that is some of the advice that I need to do to sleep as well as possible. Yeah, that's super important, and you will need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And missing the sleep is not only uncomfortable or leads to you underperforming, but it's downright dangerous. It's if you sleep less than 6 hours compared to more than 7, you double your risk of cancer, according to Matthew Walker, who has written the excellent book Why We Sleep. So it's actually dangerous not to sleep properly. Yeah.
Wow. I gotta get more sleep. I feel like I'm like if I'm lucky, I get six, and that's
Hmm.
just me. But the coffee afternoon, that's a tough one for me. I am a coffee fiend, so I'll have it. I've had a cup already in the morning. I'll probably have a cup right after this podcast. But yeah, it's hard. It's just it's habitual. I have it. Maybe I just got to get to the decaf and then maybe wean myself off it for a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I do. I do the decaf, if there's something afternoon, then I would do a decaf, yeah.
Yeah, I would
Eh,
always
eh,
joke with people if they get decaf, and I'm like, "Why are you getting coffee if you're just getting decaf?" But
mm. Yeah, it's useful. It's better sleep. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
it, in one of the I was listening to one of the podcasts that you were on, and one of the stories, and we were talking about stress, but also like lifestyle stresses and happiness, and you were kind of giving this example of your because you were with Doctors Without Borders, and you were in some areas that were like war-torn countries, and one of the things you mentioned was like you looked
Mm.
around and you see that people that kind of had nothing seem to be the happiest, and then you look at other areas of the world that have abundance and they seem to be very unhappy.
Yeah, yeah, that's a weird thing, In our society today, we have as much as any generation before us, with all kind of luxuries and things that if you went back 100 years, people would be just amazed at what we have. And still, a lot of people are unsatisfied. They are looking for what they don't have, and they are comparing themselves to others, on social media and so on. And so when I went to Angola, which just had been through a war, this is now almost 30 years ago, I was expecting to see very sad people, and when I came there and in the years before I got there, half the population had died in this war. And they were so full of life, so full of happiness, of togetherness, of feeling meaning, and of course being outside doing manual work, sleeping when it's the nighttime, at that time, and also having this good mood, dancing in the streets, the children, although they ate minimally, were still very energetic, of course, except for the worst ones that were in the hospital where I worked, where 3 children died every day, more or less, from starvation, from malaria, from pneumonia, and so on. But still, in those conditions, I saw a joy and the joy of life that I, well, had not seen. And the biggest shock for me was coming home and seeing the sad, sullen faces on people and reading everybody like complaining about things. So that was kind of a surprise to me and triggered me into finding out, oh, how can we live better even if we have it all, Um, how can we learn from then to enjoy life and to see, look at what we have and not only be focused on what we don't have, So I don't
Yeah.
really know the reasons for that, but people are much more lonely, much more to themselves. And our modern lifestyle is kind of exactly the opposite from what we are developed for. We
It's
live inside most of the time. 97% of the time we spend inside. We eat food that we're not supposed to eat. Most people move too little. You don't get enough sunshine. We don't get enough nature. We don't challenge our bodies enough to build ourselves stronger. So most people, not you, of course, I can see, but but most people do.
I'm trying. And everything you just listed is free.
Yeah, it's free. Yeah.
Is free. You know,
So it's
build.
available to everybody, and
Hmm.
it's when you get sick that it starts to get expensive, and then it starts to depend on your wallet if you get the best treatment or not. So the best thing would be to avoid getting sick, of course, and we can do that. So if you do these things, make sure that you sleep enough, make sure that you move enough, that you have some ways of managing stress, that you drink the minimal amount of alcohol, that you eat real food, and you have good relationships, then, according to an American study from veterans, you can live 24 years longer if you do all these right things. So there's not just a couple of years or 2, 3 years that are at stake. It's decades we're talking. And that is also with my own experience. I've been working as a doctor for 26 years. I've had more than 100,000 consultations. And I can see this clearly that if you do the right choices in these areas, then your chances of getting to 90 years old is quite good. And if you don't do these things, if you do the opposite, you drink a lot, you don't move, you don't sleep well enough, and all of these things, and you eat crap food, then you'd be lucky to pass 70 years old. So I can see that this difference is real.
Yeah, and it's also this quality of life too, because I talk with other people that's been in the podcast, and it's you might make it to 80 or 90, but what are those years looking like? A lot of people could make it to 80 or 90, but they on lots of medications, lots of hospital visits. I know my parents right now. My father just turned 70. He had a triple bypass. My mom had her thyroid taken out. She's almost 70, and lots of medication they're on. That's her lifestyle now because of all of the years that they didn't do those things. And
Yeah.
you mentioned something as well. I tell people, you're like, it's really expensive to get sick, and
Yeah.
it's I tell people when they give me the because I'll be train other people and clients. I really just, don't have time to work out at all. And I was like, if you don't have time to work out at all or like take your life in your own hands, then you don't have time to get sick then.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
that's
right.
gonna be a
Yeah.
bad thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that time that you're saving there you will be subtracted at the other end of your life by uh, by a factor of something. Yeah. So
And
those 24 years, I must also say, is that if you do these things from you are 40 years old, so and so there, and even if you start changing your lifestyle when you're 60, I think it was 16 or 18 years that you will live longer. So you would essentially, even if you had a poor lifestyle until you're 60, you could kind of double your remaining lifetime if you start using and changing your lifestyle. So, and I know because I did that. I used to weigh 40 pounds more than I do today. I used to not exercise at all. I used to drink alcohol more or less every day, not caring about sleep, food, anything. So until my father died then 10 years ago, then I understood I have to change everything around. So it's possible. And of course, it's motivating when you can see from your variables that you can see the result in real time. Then it
yeah,
gets more motivating, to do the cold plunges, for example, to do the fasting when you see that the effect is good on your heart rate variability.
with the wearables, do you see, just kind of in your experience, you see the future of healthcare kind of evolving? Do you think HRV monitoring could be in more of a mainstream practice with healthcare?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's already happening at a massive scale in Norway. I'm not sure how it is in the US or but I think in Scandinavia people are taking control of their health, you know, and uh, s- and of course to be able to control your health, you have to see these numbers. You have to be able to track it, to measure it yourself. So it's kind of a major shift then from the power being in the doctor's hands and the healthcare system's hands and into your own hands, literally. And from after you get sick until avoid getting sick in the first place. So, and now we know also so much more about it and that there is money to be made, you know. The problem in the healthcare system is that there's too much money in sick people, you know, like your parents, you know, there's too much money in having sick people on lifelong medications for 20, 30 years, you know, maybe a lot of them would have five, six, seven, eight different medications. And now the good thing about these wearables is that there is money to be made to help people avoid getting sick. And that's quite uplifting because you need to follow the money. There needs to be some financial, you know, money to be made on healthy people. So that I
Yeah.
think is one of the big changers in this.
Mhm. I it was years ago. This has had to be like 10 years ago where uh we had insurance through my job, and they did this program, and they don't do it anymore. But you, if you had, I think it was Fitbit at the time. If you had a Fitbit, and I might have been even an Apple Watch as well, but you can connect it to your insurance, and they can see like all of the activity that you're doing, your heart rate, whatever. And if you were healthy, you actually paid less. And
Hmm.
I was like,
Yeah.
that, yeah, I'm like that. I'm doing the work now. Like I'm making, I'm actually contributing to not causing the healthcare system to be overrun by people. And so I'm kind of getting rewarded for that. And I thought that was cool. And then they changed it over and it did. I don't know why they did that, but they don't have that anymore. But I think maybe some
Hmm.
people still hold that to today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's, what is it for? We were talking on another podcast, $4.8 trillion in the United States of what we pay yearly on healthcare.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's I think it's the one of the most expensive healthcare systems in the world, and you're not getting the results from it. So it's
Yeah.
and of course, and the system. So it's like that a system that makes money on solving a problem will maintain the problem that it's the solution to, you know. So it's kind of a unconscious, but you know, a mechanism in these systems. So it will stay that way until there's more money to be made, you know, and keeping people healthy.
Yeah.
So
So take care of it now.
Mm.
You got to
Yeah.
take care of it now.
Yeah, and one thing is that of course, you would save the money on the insurance by doing those steps on the Fitbit, but you will save years of your life, you know, with experiences and life on the planet, you know, and that's probably worth more than money.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, is there anything that you're currently working on or some future projects coming up that you're excited about?
Yeah, I'm right now I'm finishing my book in Norwegian though, so if it gets translated into English, I don't know, but it's about rest. The rest cure is about how to improve your ability to rest and to do the recovery work because seems to be the hardest thing for people. So it's kind of a more like a deep dive into the rest part of the post cure. That chapter in the post cure is probably like 15 pages, you know, and now it's kind of 150 pages uh, on that subject. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that, like you said it, I feel like rest and just play in general, is we don't get enough of that. We're too focused on the day to day, our works, our jobs, getting here, getting there, and
Yeah.
then when we get home, we watch Netflix or we get on the couch and we get too comfortable with that. But devoting the
Yeah.
time to like really rest, recover, but also play. But
Yeah.
any other future projects you're thinking up or events coming up for you?
Yeah, well, Yeah, I will of course run the New York Marathon now soon, so I'm excited to see New York and see how that will be. And then
Nice.
I'm also actually going to start just in a new book. It's about the sun because the sun exposure, the sun has got a bad rap, for being dangerous. But it seems that we have forgotten to look at the positive sides of the energy from the sun that is cooperating with our skin, with our hormones, and improving our function. Of course, we are a species developed under the sun for millions of years, and we have learned to use the energy from the sun. It's electromagnetic energy, entering our cells. So that half of the sun energy is infrared light that will penetrate maybe 5, 6, 7 centimeters into our bodies and doing a lot of good work. So the price of scaring people about melanoma and the reason why we try to stay out of the sun has also a huge price. So we don't get the benefits either from the sun. So, and now the research is very clear on that is so much heart disease that comes from the lack of sun actually. So I'm really looking forward to start that project and to dive into the all the misconceptions about sunshine and the dangers of sunshine and the lack of exploration of the benefits.
Oh, those both sound awesome.
Mm.
I do want to have a quick follow up to that, just out of curiosity. A lot of places that are health, wellness, studios, fitness places are now installing infrared lights, infrared saunas. Is that like a comparable in terms of benefits, or it's kind of like a cash cow of like a fancy thing that kind of works?
Yeah, it should work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to go into the subject more,
Hmm.
but it seems to work. Yeah. So it's the same energy, same energy rays, and the same frequencies that they use that is from the sun rays. So it should be useful, and you can see also that the research can show that the mitochondria work better with the um, infrared exposure.
Awesome. That's super interesting. So I'm gonna be excited. Hopefully these next two books get translated to English, so I
Hmm.
can I could take a read at them. But Torkel, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you via social media or website?
Yeah, I'm on social media. I'm Dr. Torkil. I'm dr.torkil. And of course, my book is on Amazon and also an audiobook for people who like to listen to books. And we also have a website called thepulsecure.com where you can see I have a free 1 hour lecture there where I can tell you and show you how you can use your Garmin watch to micromanage your stress and identify the kind of energy thieves that you maybe was not aware of.
Awesome. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. I know it's late in in Norway right now, but appreciate you coming
Mhm.
on to the podcast. And
Yeah.
thanks for everybody listening to another episode of the Primal Foundations podcast.